Welcome on. I'm Michelle McNabb, Librarian Manager of the Family History and Genealogy Center at the Danish Immigrant Museum in Elkhorn, Iowa. I am retelling a biography of Regetta Maria Nielsen, an early Danish member of the Mormon Church. At this point in her account, it is 1863, and Regetta has just left Denmark to join a Mormon immigration party. Before leaving Denmark, I got acquainted with my future husband, James Thurston. I was not very favorably impressed with him the first time I saw him. I told my employer's wife that he was the ugliest, most ill-mannered fellow I had ever seen. But afterwards I fell in love with him and was promised to him before leaving our native land. We joined the Saints and immigrated together as far as Liverpool, England. I will say here that I had more than one offer of marriage, but refused them to stay true to the one of my choice. And because of this fact, I was separated from my lover and put on another ship to sail with strangers to New York. We left Liverpool on May 8, 1863, on the ship B.S. Kimball, with 654 or so saints under the direction of Hans Peter Lund. My lover left the same day with 38 saints under the direction of Anders Christensen on the ship Consignment. Our ship landed in New York on June 15th, after a journey of 5 weeks. The consignment had not yet arrived. When I landed in New York, I had no clothes, only what I stood up in, and no money, for my baggage went with the other company's baggage, and so I could go no farther. I was placed in a hard position, in a strange land, among strangers, with no money, no clothes, and not being able to speak the language. At 6 p.m. that evening, the company I sailed with was to leave for Florence, Nebraska by rail. I asked H.P. Lund for help to go with the Saints, and he answered me that I did not belong to that company, so he could do nothing for me. The company went on, and I was left alone in Castle Garden, not knowing where to go or lay my head that night. While standing there, an apostate came and asked me to go home with him and keep house for his wife until the other ship came in. That offer I accepted. Every day after my work was done, I would walk down to Castle Garden to see if the rest of the company had arrived. After 5 days, the ship arrived, and the first person I met was my lover. I need not say how happy we were when we met, or how we acted, but we'll leave that to your imagination. I lived in hopes that he could help me to Florence, as I knew he had money. But unfortunately for me, he had given all he had to a poor man in his family just a half hour before. So I asked the president for help, but he said he had no help for me. And once more I was left behind and had to go back to my workplace to stay until I could go further. I stayed there 3 weeks longer, and will say that it was the hardest 3 weeks I've ever spent in my whole life. My virtue was sought in every way by that rascal, but the Lord kept me from temptation and harm. I met a Dutch immigrant who had decided to stay in New York with his daughter, who was living there. So I got his ticket to come on to Omaha with the man and wife I was working for, and stayed with them until I could get away. As a last resort to accomplish his vile purpose, my employer got his wife to go see some of her friends, and when we were alone, he wanted to buy some wine. I did not know what to say, so after thinking a moment, I said yes. And as he went out via the front hall to buy the wine, I went out the back way, into the pouring rain, and ran as hard as I could. I finally came to a blacksmith shop, where I inquired the way and distance to Florence. They told me to keep right on the way I was going for a few miles, and I would get there. I had continued on the short distance when I caught up with 2 men with covered wagons and ox teams. They offered me a ride and asked me where I was going. I told them in my broken language about my circumstances and where I wanted to go. They told me they were going to meet the immigrants and help them get to Utah. I got into the wagon, but we had not gone far when I looked out and saw a man coming on foot as hard as he could run, calling to the brethren to stop. I recognized him and asked the brethren to help me and not let him take me back again. They assured me they would, and for me not to be afraid. They had quite a time with the man, but they succeeded in keeping me out of his clutches, and I continued on in safety. Well, will Regetta get to Utah? We'll hear more of her adventures next time. I'm Michelle McNabb from the Danish Immigrant Museum. Ha' det godt i dag.